Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what I think is the 24th annual general meeting, if you count the inaugural meeting in June 1994 as the first. We are recording the meeting for the benefit of those members who can't come. I've got to introduce myself. My name is John Francis. For my sins, I'm Vice Chairman and Treasurer of the Society. I've been Treasurer for, I think, 21 years. It seems longer. I bear apologies from a number of people. First of all, Simon and Laura Coombs cannot be with us since Laura is not well. Hugh Cobb of the Vaughan Williams Charitable Trust, who is of course a member in his own right, has asked me to present apologies. And we also offer apologies from trustees William Headley, who's the journal editor, and Vice President Stephen Connock. Andrew Neil is behind the camera. We'll see him the other side of it later. Welcome, Andrew. He is going to speak to us later about Michael Kennedy. I'd like to thank Roy for arranging the AGM. And on behalf of Simon, I'd like to thank all the trustees for all that they do all through the year. I'm in touch with most of the trustees most of the time, and there's an awful lot going on under the surface. So thank you to everybody for tremendous voluntary efforts. Now back to Simon as chairman. The chairman is appointed by the trustees from among their number. We appointed Simon for a 3-year term, which expires more or less at the next trustees meeting. We recently agreed to extend that term for another year, and so we're carrying on with Simon as chairman, and we'll let you know when and if that changes. We welcomed a new trustee during the year, Chris Batt, who's on my left in the second row, with Adi, his wife, who's always supporting him in all that he does. The Society is very grateful to Chris and Adi for what they've been doing at Leith Hill Place, and he'll be talking to us about that later. Spare copies of last year's accounts are here. If you need one, I haven't got one. I've pinched one, although I think I've almost memorised the content. Now, 2018 is a minor anniversary year because Vaughan Williams died 60 years ago this year. On the anniversary, I think the 26th of August, I found myself in Down Anley, where there was a festival, and that was a great festival over a long weekend, bank holiday weekend. I think it was the Saturday when it absolutely slung it down, but Sunday, the anniversary of Vaughan Williams' death, dawned bright and fair, and it was a very great occasion. The other thing I want to talk about is Stephen Connock's long-awaited and invaluable book of recollections of Vaughan Williams, Toward the Sun Rising. Stephen started this sometime in the 90s, I think, gathering recollections, sometimes tape recording them, sometimes videoing them. He's met a lot of people who knew Vaughan Williams, who of course are no longer with us. These reminiscences are absolutely priceless. To cap that, he's written the most stunning introduction. If you wanted a brief but comprehensive, concise biography of Vaughan Williams, this is it. It's here. This is a fabulous book. So it's been well reviewed in Gramophone. I haven't met anybody who hasn't been thrilled by it.
As part of preparing for this meeting, at relatively short notice, John kindly sent all of those of us who were likely to be speaking some guidance notes about when we were doing it and what we should do. And his brief to me was to tell them what's happened so far. I'm going to stray from that a little, I'm afraid, because in the June edition of the journal, you had a very good comprehensive summary from Simon describing the background to why the exhibition at Leith Hill Place was decided to move it upstairs into larger rooms. And what I want to do is to focus more on the reasons why it's happened and the effect within the house itself, and also some of the things we'll want to be doing over the winter season when the Leith place is actually shut, because it's only open between March and October of each year. So the first thing is really, in terms of the context of how the exhibition is now, it needs to be rooted in what's happening to the house itself, because after a long period of lack of attention, when it was a dormitory for a boys' school, and then once the National Trust had taken over, not a great deal had happened. The small exhibition downstairs just by the entrance was in there with that very good timeline and the practice piano, but there wasn't much opportunity to spread. Over the last year or so, quite a lot has been done into improving both the building itself and also its presentation to visitors. It feels like a mini renaissance for the whole building, so that for the first time for many years it's apparently watertight, which is probably one of the most important things you need to do. Lots of parts of the building, setting aside where we are now, the 2 rooms upstairs were decorated by the volunteers, ready for the exhibition to move in, but the other main rooms have been redecorated as part of using the house as sets for Call the Midwife. So they got everything decorated for nothing on the basis that it had to be looking in the right condition. So you might want to, I think it's supposed to be on at Christmas, that edition, so you can admire the decorations if you can't get to the house because it's shutting soon. They've replanned some of the rooms, they put new furniture, well not new furniture, but appropriate furniture in, so there's much more now feeling in the main public rooms that it's a place that it may not be inhabited, but at least it's got that feeling, a sense that it could be used. They're putting up more information about the house, the contents of the house, and indeed they've just opened up the basement, where apparently the inhabitants at the turn of the last century did some quite interesting paintings on the basement walls of what they thought were going to be Egyptian gods and things, and they were quite disturbing, some of them. And the other thing to say is, alongside all of that, the improvements to the attraction, the visitor attraction as the National Trust would call it, they've started a whole range of workshops, craft workshops and other activities, and temporary exhibitions. Has been recently, some of you may have seen it, an artist's interpretation of the Lark Ascending in the entrance hall, and although it may not stick to what the original music was speaking to us with, it's actually made a dramatic difference to the entrance to the property because it's much more cheerful, or has been. There are concerts, there are talks, and in a lot of those RVW has featured. The relocation, interestingly, of the exhibition upstairs into the larger rooms was the first step towards that in a way, because that happened across last winter and then other stuff has followed. So it fits very well into what their mission is, to improve the quality of the house itself and also what visitors can do while they're there. So the other thing I wanted to talk about very briefly was the collections itself. So not what has happened, but what could be happening in the future. The advantage of the new spaces is there's room for improvement. And if you've seen the collection that's there at the moment, it really contains basically what was downstairs. So there's lots of space for development, plenty of wall space and room to put in more exhibition material, freestanding if we want to. But we felt when we worked with an exhibition designer that it would be much better to take a fairly slow minimalist approach and start to build up steadily, so that what we're going to look at during the winter is putting some more informational boards on the walls in the largest room, which is the south-facing room, to see whether, between the discussions that are going on with the National Trust and Surrey County Council, the artefacts which were originally held as part of the Performing Arts Library here might be put on display in the exhibition at Leith Place. There are issues about that in terms of ownership and also security, but that's something that there are going to be discussions about over the winter.
It might be appropriate to start with just explaining why we are in the Ranmore Suite at Denbies and not at the Performing Arts Library, which is what you might have been expecting when we originally announced the date. And that is simply because the Performing Arts Library closed on the 10th of August at relatively short notice, and the books and most of the library content had gone to Bourne Hall in Ewell. And we're very grateful to Denbies for making this room and the Ranmore Suite available, as I said, at quite short notice, so that we didn't have to go too far in our relocation. But just some back history about the Performing Arts Library, and I apologise to those of you who are involved and know it all already. But in August last year, the Surrey County Council launched a consultation on the future of the Performing Arts Library. This was driven by funding, as always. The Surrey libraries were told in no uncertain terms that they had to save £180,000 a year from the Performing Arts Library. I don't think its total spend and budget was very much over 200,000, so that was quite a tall order. They launched a consultation paper which listed some options which they wanted to consider. One was total closure, another was disbursement of collections among other Surrey libraries, and a third was transfer to some other similar-minded organisation. None of these went down very well with the former users of the Performing Arts Library. And it's worth saying that we think of it as a music library, but in fact it was a music library and it also supported drama groups. So, and it was very well regarded by its users, and most of the musical organisations couldn't survive without the copies which they were hiring from the Performing Arts Library. So this obviously caused consternation, and it didn't take long before the Friends of the Performing Arts Library had organised a meeting to try and get people together to consider what to do next. And the RVW Society had an interest because the Performing Arts Library had a display on Vaughan Williams, and we had a number of our own artefacts in that display. It wasn't solely our display because the Leith Hill Musical Festival contributed quite a lot, and some things were owned by the Surrey libraries themselves. This meeting very rapidly concluded that there was a very strong groundswell of opinion which wanted to resist the Surrey's proposals. As far as users were concerned, closure was a distinct no-no, and people weren't at all keen on dispersing the collection among other libraries, because one of the things we valued about the Performing Arts Library was the specialist advice we got, and also if everything just disappears into the general library collection, it wouldn't be long before it got it either disappeared or got so dog-eared that it wasn't usable, and then there'd be no funds for replacement. So there were hopes that it would be possible to transfer it to another organisation, and I think there were some discussions with some possible bodies, but they didn't get anywhere. The Friends of the Performing Arts Library then stepped in and said, well, if there's no one suitable, we will set up an organisation which could take it over, which is what they have done. They've formed a charity with the purpose of running a Performing Arts Library in Surrey, and they've called it Newspal. Very original, but everyone knows what it's doing. And the issue that they've been trying to take forward since is to persuade Surrey that they are a suitable body to take over the running of the Performing Arts Library. because we don't think Surrey are keen on being associated with something which fails in fairly short order. And the difficulty is if it costs Surrey £200,000 or so to run the Arts Library in a year, that's going to put quite a lot of funding to get from the ordinary users, and it's a great deal more than they were paying up to that point. Since then, Newspell have developed a proposal. They've asked for funding from the users of about £90,000, and they're well over £80,000 at present. And they have persuaded Surrey that they are a credible organisation, and the Surrey County Council Cabinet has endorsed a proposal that they should take over the running of the Performing Arts Library for both the music and the drama sides in their own premises, which there's a hope that they will be in Woking, so it's not too far away, and certainly in Surrey. This is subject to the Newspell putting forward a robust business plan, which they're well on the way to doing. So the next, there was a public meeting earlier this month which sort of endorsed their plans, and the arts groups were encouraging the trustees very strongly to keep going, and they're hoping to bring the whole matter to Surrey Council in November, their cabinet meeting, to consider proposals and hopefully get the go-ahead. So if all goes well, we'll be back to our specialist performing arts library running in the new year. In addition to the library books, as I said earlier, there are other things. There's a lot of Vaughan Williams papers which belong to the Leith Hill Musical Festival, and there are also various things which belong to the RVW Society. The latter, Graham Munsey went through, claimed what was ours, and I think they've all gone back to his home while we decide what to, or he decides what to do with them. The Leith Hill papers have also gone back, and might well end up at somewhere like the British Library, because there are some really interesting archive things with Vaughan Williams markings in, which as time goes by, we don't want to see them disappear out to sort of individual offices, get stored under the bed and then finally disappear. So we'd like them to go to somewhere which is can look after them properly.